June 14th, 2016, I traveled to Nicaragua to assist in a research study regarding the effects of biomass-fueled burning cook stoves on pulmonary health in women of rural communities. Bridges to Community extended their help and provided a home base in Tadazna, located in northern Nicaragua. Over the next week and a half, we would compile data from homes in and near Tadazna in the form of interviews and measurements before and during times of cooking. The survey consisted of a baseline section for the woman being interviewed. We inquired about the woman's medical history in regards to her pulmonary health, living conditions, history with cooking, and the house inhabitants and their medical history. During these interviews, I had a chance to see the interaction between researcher, translator, and interviewee. Of the women we interviewed, many were receptive and engaged. True enough, some seemed indifferent, but they were kindly providing answers to all the questions being asked. And in addition to the questionnaire, baseline readings consisted of measurements of carbon monoxide content and volatile organic compounds present in the air around the stove when it was not being used. In some homes, the wood would be burning all day, slowly smoldering with burning embers. This made sense as the environment was humid and moist, which would make it harder to start fires for the stove quickly. Of the homes that had to start fires anew for meals, the smoke that would result was intense, especially when the women would have to peek their heads into the stove to blow on the kindling fire and feed wood pieces in. There was also a filter device used to capture particulate matter present in the air that most often affect pulmonary function. And then to complete baseline, we asked the women to perform a spirometry measurement, which consisted of three main parts, which included forced vital capacity, forced expiratory flow in 1 second, and peak expiratory flow. We were expecting difficulty when explaining the spirometry test to the women, as well as with the presence of others, such as other team members, family, males, or friends in the room. There were times when the ladies wouldn't perform the test as necessary, such as making a complete seal around the spirometer, not breathing with as much force as possible, breathing twice into the spirometer, and removing the spirometer before their breath was completed. With all of these issues, Roberto, my team's translator, would patiently and respectfully repeat the instructions to the women, encouraging them to breathe into the spirometer with as much force as they could possibly use. While the presence of others may have embarrassed or rushed the women, there were cases in which husbands would encourage their wives, or friends would come over and laugh off the nerves with one another during spirometry readings. Measurements would be reassessed, but during the cooking phase of the survey, which also included an observation chart crafted by Danielle. For functionality purposes, Danielle ultimately simplified the chart to monitor the total time in which the women were actively near the fire and then away from the stove. After 20 minutes of exposure, spirometry would be performed once again, and the VOC CO monitor and filtration device would be exposed to the burning cook stove for 30 minutes. For some sites, timing had to be shortened because the women began cooking far earlier than expected and had only about 15 minutes remaining to cook. All that we could do was jump on top of the measurements and get the equipment started as soon as possible to get the readings. During the cooking observations, readings would typically show higher VOC, CO measurements, and sometimes the filter paper would be on the darker shade of brown or black for various homes. With some of the women's spirometry readings would be lower than those of the baseline, but with others, the readings were about the same. After this entire process, the teams collected data from 38 sites, only 2 short of the minimum goal. The next step of the process is to start data entries and analyzing data to compare it to expectations. I must say that I have a tremendous respect for researchers and the effort that must be provided to these projects. I hope to learn more about the completed research process and see the outcome of the data in greater meaning. Entering into a new culture, immersing myself into completely unknown living conditions, and interacting with the people of Tadazna was a tremendous experience, and it was completely novel for me. The students and staff that I worked with were outstanding. Everyone, despite being our complete strangers at first, worked well together and shared some fun times while traveling to sites and during the final beach days. I found this work to be challenging and engaging, leading me to think that it would be worthwhile to participate in field study work in the future.